Story 1. The Last Call at the Blind Pig. The Blind Pig was a dive bar, the kind of place you only found if you were looking for it, and even then, you might miss it. Tucked away down a narrow, unlit alleyway, its only sign was a flickering neon buyer's sign that cast a sickly green glow on the damp brick. I was a regular, a creature of habit, and after a long day at work, the Blind Pig was my sanctuary. It was always quiet, always dimly lit, and the bartender, a gruff man named Frank, knew my order before I even sat down. One Tuesday night, I was the last customer. Frank was wiping down the bar, the clinking of glasses, the only sound in the otherwise silent room. I finished my drink, paid my tab, and started to head out. As I reached the door, I heard a faint, almost imperceptible sound, a whisper. I paused, turning back. Frank was still at the bar, his back to me. "Frank?" I asked. He didn't respond. I shrugged it off, attributing it to my tired mind, and pushed open the heavy wooden door. As I stepped into the alley, the whisper grew louder, more distinct. It was a woman's voice, soft and mournful, calling my name. Michael, ... My blood ran cold. I spun around, but the alley was empty. The neon sign of the Blind Pig flickered, casting long, dancing shadows. I tried to tell myself it was the wind, or my imagination, but the voice was too clear, too personal. I started to walk faster, my heart pounding in my chest. Then, I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, deliberate, dragging footsteps. I didn't dare look back. I quickened my pace, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The alley seemed to stretch on forever, the darkness pressing in on me. The whisper grew louder, closer, now accompanied by a faint, almost inaudible sobbing. "Don't leave me, ... it pleaded. I broke into a run, my feet pounding on the wet pavement. I could feel a cold presence behind me, a chilling breath on the back of my neck. I finally burst out of the alley, into the relative safety of the main street, my lungs burning, my body trembling. I didn't stop until I reached my apartment, locking the door behind me, and leaning against it, gasping for air. I never went back to the Blind Pig. I tried to rationalize it, to convince myself it was just a trick of the mind, a hallucination, brought on by exhaustion and too many late nights. But the memory of that whisper, that mournful plea, still haunts me. I often wonder who that woman was, and why she was calling my name. Was she a lost soul, trapped in the confines of that secluded bar, or something more sinister, something that preyed on the lonely and the lost? Years later, I still avoid dark alleyways, and the sound of a woman's whisper sends shivers down my spine. I learned that night that some places hold on to more than just memories, and some last calls are not just for drinks, but for souls. And I often wonder if Frank, the gruff bartender, knew about the uninvited guest who lingered after closing, forever seeking a companion in the silent, dimly lit confines of the Blind Pig. That whisper, so faint yet so clear, clung to me like a shroud as I stumbled out of the alley. The city, usually a comforting cacophony of sounds, now felt alien and menacing. Every shadow seemed to stretch and writhe. Every distant siren sounded like a mournful wail. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see a spectral figure emerge from the darkness, its eyes burning with an unholy light. The memory of Frank's impassive face, his back to me as the whisper called my name, gnawed at me. Did he know? Was he a part of it? Or was he just a weary man, accustomed to the strange occurrences that clung to the old bar like dust? I spent the next few days in a state of heightened paranoia. Every creak of my apartment floorboards, every gust of wind against my window, sent shivers down my spine. I found myself jumping at shadows, my heart hammering against my ribs at the slightest unexpected sound. Sleep offered no escape. The whisper would invade my dreams, a haunting melody that twisted into a desperate plea. I saw her face in my mind's eye, a pale, gaunt visage, her eyes wide with an unspeakable sorrow. She was always just out of reach, a spectral echo of a tragedy I couldn't comprehend. I tried to find information about the blind pig, its history, any strange incidents that might have occurred there. The internet yielded little. It was just an old, forgotten bar, a relic of a bygone era. No mention of disappearances, no unsolved mysteries. It was as if the bar itself was a black hole, swallowing up secrets and leaving no trace. The more I searched, the more frustrated I became. The more convinced I was that I was losing my mind. One evening, unable to shake the feeling of being watched, I found myself drawn back to the alley. It was darker than I remembered, the neon sign of the blind pig, completely dead, casting no light on the damp brick. The air was heavy, thick with a cold, oppressive silence. I stood there for a long time, listening, waiting, and then I heard it again, the whisper. This time, it wasn't calling my name. It was a fragment of a song, a melancholic lullaby, sung in a voice so filled with sorrow that it brought tears to my eyes. And then, a faint, almost imperceptible sound, like a gentle tap on glass, coming from inside the bar. I didn't go in. I couldn't. The fear was too profound, the sense of dread too overwhelming. I knew, with a chilling certainty, that whatever was in there, whatever had whispered my name, was not just a memory, but a presence, forever bound to that secluded bar. I turned and walked away, the mournful lullaby echoing in my ears, a silent testament to the secrets held within the blind pig. I still avoid that alley, and the sound of a woman's whisper sends shivers down my spine. I learned that night that some places hold on to more than just memories, and some last calls are not just for drinks, but for souls, forever trapped in the silent, dimly lit confines of a forgotten bar. Story 2. The Bartender's Secret at the Velvet Shadow. The Velvet Shadow was a speakeasy, hidden behind a false bookshelf in an old bookstore. It was the kind of place where the drinks were strong, the jazz was smooth, and the clientele were as mysterious as the establishment itself. I stumbled upon it by accident, drawn in by the faint strains of a saxophone drifting from a dimly lit doorway. It quickly became my favorite haunt, a place where I could disappear into the shadows and forget the world outside. The bartender, a man named Silas, was as much a part of the allure as the bar itself. He was a man of few words, with eyes that seemed to hold 1,000 untold stories. He mixed drinks with an almost surgical precision, his movements fluid and silent. He never smiled, never laughed, but there was a quiet intensity about him that was both unsettling and captivating. He seemed to know everyone, and yet no one seemed to know him. One rainy evening, I was the only customer. Silas was polishing glasses, the rhythmic clinking a hypnotic counterpoint to the soft jazz. I asked him about the bar, its history, its secrets. He paused, his movements slowing, and then, in a voice as smooth and dark as the velvet curtains, he began to speak. He told me stories of the bar's past, of the illicit deals struck, the broken hearts mended, the lives changed within its walls. But then, his voice dropped, becoming a low, conspiratorial whisper. He told me about the others. They never truly leave, he murmured, his eyes fixed on a spot behind me. They just linger. I turned, but saw nothing. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to deepen, to writhe with an unseen presence. He spoke of patrons who had vanished without a trace, of whispers in empty booths, of cold spots that moved with an unseen purpose. He spoke of a woman who still danced to the jazz, a man who still played poker in the back room, a couple who still argued in hushed tones by the fireplace. All unseen, all unheard, except by him. I tried to laugh it off, to dismiss it as a bartender's tale, a way to add to the mystique of the place. But Silas's eyes, those ancient, knowing eyes, held a profound sadness, a weary resignation that chilled me to the bone. He wasn't telling a story. He was recounting a truth. He then looked directly at me, his gaze piercing, and said, "Some nights, they get restless. They want company." I finished my drink quickly, the smooth jazz suddenly sounding discordant, the dim lights feeling oppressive. I paid my tab, my hands trembling slightly, and made my excuses. As I walked out, I could feel 1,000 unseen eyes on my back, a chorus of silent whispers following me into the rainy night. I never went back to the Velvet Shadow. The allure of its mystery had been replaced by a profound sense of dread. I often wonder about Silas, the silent bartender, and the secrets he held within the velvet confines of that hidden speakeasy. Was he a guardian, a keeper of lost souls? Or was he, too, one of the lingering, forever bound to the shadows and the whispers of the unseen? The memory of his words and the chilling presence of the uninvited guests still haunts me. A silent reminder that some secrets are best left undisturbed, and some shadows, once entered, are never truly left behind. Silas's words, "They never truly leave," echoed in my mind long after I left the Velvet Shadow. The smooth jazz, once a comforting backdrop, now felt like a haunting melody, a soundtrack to the unseen presences he had described. I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, convinced that a shadowy figure was lurking just beyond my peripheral vision. The city, usually a vibrant tapestry of sounds and sights, now felt like a thin veil, barely concealing a world teeming with restless spirits. I tried to find information about the Velvet Shadow, its history, any strange occurrences that might have been reported. The internet yielded little. It was a well-kept secret, a place that existed outside the usual channels. I found a few obscure articles about the building's past, a former speakeasy during Prohibition, a place known for its clandestine activities and its colorful, often tragic, clientele. There were whispers of unexplained disappearances, of patrons who had simply vanished into the night, leaving no trace. The more I delved into its history, the more I realized that Silas's stories were not just tales. They were echoes of a dark and unsettling past. One night, unable to shake the feeling of being watched, I found myself drawn back to the old bookstore. The lights were off, the street deserted. I pushed open the heavy wooden door, and the familiar scent of old books and stale cigar smoke filled my nostrils. I walked to the false bookshelf, my heart pounding, and pushed it open. The Velvet Shadow was dark, silent, and empty, or so I thought. As I stepped inside, the faint strains of jazz music began to play, seemingly from nowhere. The air grew cold, and I could feel 1,000 unseen eyes on me, a chorus of silent whispers filling the room. I saw fleeting shadows in the corners of my vision, felt cold breaths on my neck. It was as if the bar had come alive, teeming with the lingering presences Silas had described. I stood there, frozen, surrounded by the unseen, the unheard, the forever lingering. Then, I heard it, a faint, almost inaudible clinking of glasses, coming from behind the bar. I peered into the darkness, and saw a shadowy figure, tall and silent, polishing glasses. It was Silas. He looked up, his eyes, those ancient, knowing eyes, fixed on me. He didn't speak, but his gaze conveyed a profound sense of resignation, a silent invitation to join the lingering. I backed away slowly, my eyes fixed on him, until I was safely out of the bar, the jazz music fading behind me. I never went back to the Velvet Shadow. The allure of its mystery had been replaced by a profound sense of dread. I often wonder about Silas, the silent bartender, and the secrets he held within the velvet confines of that hidden speakeasy. Was he a guardian, a keeper of lost souls? Or was he, too, one of the lingering, forever bound to the shadows and the whispers of the unseen? The memory of his words, and the chilling presence of the uninvited guests, still haunts me, a silent reminder that some secrets are best left undisturbed, and some shadows, once entered, are never truly left behind. Story 3. The Ghost in the Jukebox at the Rusty Nail. The Rusty Nail was a roadside bar, a relic from a bygone era, nestled deep in the heart of nowhere. It was a place where truckers stopped for a cold one, where locals gathered to escape the silence of their isolated lives, and where the jukebox, a hulking, chrome-plated monster from the 50s, was the undisputed king. I was on a cross-country road trip, and the Rusty Nail, with its faded neon sign and gravel parking lot, seemed like the perfect place to grab a bite and stretch my legs. The bar was almost empty, save for a few grizzled regulars hunched over their beers, and a bored-looking bartender polishing glasses. I ordered a burger and a beer, and then, drawn by the allure of nostalgia, I walked over to the jukebox. It was a classic, filled with old country and rockabilly tunes. I scrolled through the selections, my finger hovering over a Patsy Cline song. As I was about to make my choice, the jukebox suddenly sprang to life, a mournful, off-key rendition of Crazy filling the silent bar. I looked at the bartender, who just shrugged. "Happens sometimes," he mumbled, not even looking up. I tried to play another song, but the jukebox was unresponsive. It just kept playing Crazy, over and over. Again, each repetition more distorted, more haunting than the last. The regulars, who had initially ignored it, now exchanged uneasy glances. The air in the bar grew cold, and I felt a strange sense of unease settle over me. Then, I saw it, a faint, almost translucent figure, shimmering in the reflection of the jukebox glass. It was a woman, her face pale and drawn, her eyes filled with a profound sadness. She was wearing a simple, white dress, and her hand, almost ethereal, seemed to be resting on the jukebox selection panel. As the song reached its mournful crescendo, she slowly raised her head, and her eyes, filled with an ancient sorrow, met mine. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The music grew louder, more distorted, and the woman's image in the glass seemed to solidify, her features becoming clearer, more defined. I could feel her presence, a cold, sorrowful weight that seemed to press down on me. She didn't speak, but her eyes, those sad, haunting eyes, conveyed a story of heartbreak, of loss, of a love that had been tragically cut short. Suddenly, the music stopped. The jukebox went silent, its chrome exterior reflecting only my own terrified face. The woman's image vanished. The air in the bar grew warm again, and the regulars went back to their beers, as if nothing had happened. I looked at the bartender, who just continued polishing glasses, his face impassive. I finished my burger quickly, the food tasting like ash in my mouth, and paid my tab. I didn't even bother to finish my beer. I left the Rusty Nail, the mournful melody of Crazy echoing in my ears. I drove for hours, not stopping until the sun was high in the sky, and the memory of the ghost in the jukebox seemed like a distant nightmare. I tried to rationalize it, to convince myself it was just a trick of the light, a hallucination brought on by exhaustion, but the image of that woman, her sad, haunting eyes, remained etched in my mind. Years later, I still avoid roadside bars, and the sound of Patsy Cline sends shivers down my spine. I learned that night that some songs are not just melodies, but echoes of lost souls, forever trapped in the confines of a forgotten jukebox. And I often wonder if the ghost in the jukebox is still there, at the Rusty Nail, forever playing her mournful song, forever waiting for someone to listen to her story. The mournful melody of Crazy followed me out of the Rusty Nail, a haunting soundtrack to my escape. The image of the woman in the jukebox glass, her sad, haunting eyes, was seared into my mind. I drove 4 hours, the desolate highway stretching endlessly before me, trying to outrun the memory, but it clung to me like a second skin. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, heard her silent plea. It was as if she had imprinted herself upon my soul, a permanent reminder of the sorrow that lingered in that forgotten bar. I tried to find information about the rusty nail, its history, any local legends or unexplained occurrences. The internet was surprisingly sparse. It was just a dot on the map, a forgotten stop on a forgotten highway. I found a few old newspaper clippings, mostly about local events, but one caught my eye. A small article from the 1960s, detailing the tragic death of a young woman named Clara, a local singer who had been a regular at the Rusty Nail. She had died in a car accident just outside the bar, on her way home after a performance. The article mentioned her favorite song was Crazy, and that she had often sung it on the jukebox. A cold dread settled over me. Clara, the woman in the jukebox. It all made a horrifying kind of sense. She wasn't just a ghost. She was a lost soul, forever bound to the place where her life had tragically ended, forever playing her mournful song, forever waiting for someone to listen to her story. The thought was both heartbreaking and terrifying. I wondered if the bartender knew, if the regulars knew, if they were just accustomed to her silent presence, her mournful melody. One night, unable to shake the feeling of her presence, I found myself drawn back to the Rusty Nail. It was late, the bar was closed, and the parking lot was empty. The faded neon sign flickered erratically, casting long, dancing shadows. I walked up to the front door and peered through the dusty window. The bar was dark, silent, and empty. But then, I heard it. A faint, almost inaudible melody, drifting from within. Crazy. It was Clara. I stood there for a long time, listening to her mournful song, a silent vigil for a lost soul. I didn't go in. I couldn't. The fear was too profound, the sense of sorrow too overwhelming. I knew, with a chilling certainty, that Clara was still there, forever bound to that jukebox, forever playing her song, forever waiting for someone to remember her. I turned and walked away, the mournful melody echoing in my ears, a silent testament to the secrets held within the Rusty Nail. I still avoid roadside bars, and the sound of Patsy Cline sends shivers down my spine. I learned that night that some songs are not just melodies, but echoes of lost souls, forever trapped in the confines of a forgotten jukebox. And I often wonder if the ghost in the jukebox is still there, at the Rusty Nail, forever playing her mournful song, forever waiting for someone to listen to her story.